What really blows me away about this card is as I go through it more and more, to think that this would actually be the co-main event and Max Holloway and Yair Rodriguez would have been the main event tells me that this could have been a shocking card overall when it comes to some of the UFC fights we've seen over the last few months or so. But main event, man, we got Islam Makhachev and Thiago Moises. And frankly, is there a more clear sign that nobody really wants to fight Islam Makhachev right now? We talk about the Drew Dauber fight, and probably one of my most, favorite moments ever hearing about Justin Gaethje as Drew Dauber walks back into the gym and just looks at him and goes, right? I mean, there's even a Dustin Poirier podcast episode with Joe Rogan that just talks about weight distribution and how good these guys are at just knowing what to do next and stay a level ahead of you. Drew Dauber pretty much said it's just so obvious this guy's been doing this since he was 4 or 5 years old, and it's just so key, man. It's not even about just pure strength, it's their technique and their ability to really understand body movement and body weight. It's just such a marvel to watch these guys work. And the big thing is all of them are becoming better strikers overall. I think Umar might be kind of the best striker going into what was, some of their more recent fights. But you look at Makhachev in that Gleason-Tebow fight. What did he do right there? As Joe Rogan's trying to talk about how, where does he see the difference being and how good is he going to be on the feet? The guy cleanly knocks him out so quickly. And it was all because of the footwork and staying moving. I think the one thing with Makhachev that he learned in that Adrian Martin's loss is that when it comes to this level at the UFC, you really do have to kind of use those skills defensively. Footwork is a great defense to avoid getting knocked out. Rolling with punches, all these little things I think you learn as you go. And with Makhachev, that is just such a primo wrestler, 93% takedown defense, something like 68% takedown offense. I mean, he really is such a primo prospect. And I mean, that's a title challenger in less than a year. I mean, he already talked about how he wished to fight Justin Gaethje after fighting Drew Dauber, but nobody wants to fight him. And so he's going to get American Top Team's Thiago Moises, who we've seen a lot during the pandemic. He's been able to get some good fights in. I think the Bobby Green fight was one where people were controversially into it, thinking, Bobby Green should have won that fight. It was a split. And what's really cool about that fight is I was really interested. Sorry, that fight was unanimous, but it was just very close in terms of scoring in general. And the thing with Bobby Green is if you can roll with him and you can keep that pace going and just keep pushing forward, you kind of keep him off his game. And Lando Venata did the same thing. But my main issue with Moises is you look at the previous fights, you look at some of the losses and how they go down. They're just really close fights, and also in areas where I just don't think he's going to have success here. You talk about the Michael Johnson fight. That was one of my most heartbreaking fights because I'm such a Michael Johnson fan, and he actually looked so good in the first round. But, lapse of judgment or whatever you want to call it, very similar to the Jack Hermanson and Kelvin Gastelum fight. Bing, bang, boom, ankle lock so quickly within that first minute of the second round. I just was so shocked by that. And I'm sure Michael Johnson was too. And so when I'm going through these fights, Damir Ismagulov and Beneil Dariush being your only two losses when, Beneil Dariush was able to land 4 takedowns and go for a couple submissions. It's just you're seeing that there was obvious areas where in those fights, Moises was not able to stack up. You talk about Ismagulov being, so good on the feet. One of my favorite little Kazakh fighters coming into the UFC right now, making a name for himself, but he was able to knock down Thiago Moises with his striking and ended up pulling off a victory over 3 rounds. So those are the areas where, despite us saying that fighters are getting better and better, I mean, if Islam Makhachev is getting better and better, I'm hoping that Moises for this fight is just getting exponentially better and better, because if you look at the areas where he's been able to win fights, I'm sorry, but the scrambling ability against an Islam Makhachev is not going to work in your favor. The random heel hooks coming out of striking battles where you're kind of on the ground, I mean, he's going to eat up the opportunity to get on the ground, not try to run away before you get a leg. So I think those are the areas where, despite Thiago Moises' success over the last little bit, when you really nitpick some of the close victories and even some of the losses, it's a tough fight for him. It's just in all those areas where he might even be good. He's got this very good ability to push the pace and come forward and use his striking, but Makhachev is looking like his footwork and striking is only getting better. And I think that his ability to kind of box, roll with punches, all of that getting better is making him a much more dangerous MMA fighter and not just this Dagestani wrestler that everybody's scared of. So in terms of paths to victory, man, I just think the only way Moises is going to win this fight is distance fighting. I think that you have to keep him at bay, use some kicks, really slow him down with that power leg, and hope for the best over 3 rounds. Like, I hate to put it that way, but Makhachev is just getting so good in so many areas. And frankly, you don't want him anywhere near you when it comes to clinch areas, you know, single leg, double leg, triple leg. Makhachev, no, I'm just kidding. The real issue is going to be able to find areas where he can get himself to opportune positions, because Makhachev is going to constantly be a step ahead if the fight gets anywhere closer than this between these two guys. So for me, without that much of a, you know, reach or height difference or anything, I think leg kicks, body kicks, really trying to outpoint Makhachev is the only way this is going to happen. And if you're able to slow him down to the point where maybe the legs hurt or even the body slowing him down from a cardio perspective, then you can start trying to fill him in the face and hope for the best, because that's where you're going to start to see some of these bigger upsets happen, when the dominant fighter that relies on things like wrestling, body control, all that fun stuff, if he can't get it, what's he supposed to do? That's going to be a real test of where Islam Makhachev's striking is at, and also where, you know, I would say Thiago Moisés' striking is at least from a distance fighting perspective. I think that he's actually quite good at gauging range against really good strikers. I think Bobby Green's a great striker and actually a pretty good MMA fighter overall, but just lapses of judgment quite a lot, especially in the fight. So for me, you're not taking on the Lando Venadas or the Bobby Greens of the world right now. You're taking on the Islam Makhachevs of the world. And I think that this is probably the biggest opportunity of his life when it comes to MMA in general. But I don't think I could say it in any more ways that just there seems to be one small path to victory for him, and that's basically outpointing him and maybe getting a late finish. I just would be very surprised if Makhachev opens the door to an early finish against Thiago Moises, especially after experiencing it so eerily for himself that kind of shut the door on him. But this is going to be fun, man. AKA product, you know, Nurmagomedov was basically his second father. And that's where you're seeing the success. I mean, this was the guy that KHABIB always said was better than him. I don't know. But KHABIB just always pushed that. And I think you're starting to see Makhachev really come into his own. He's growing into the body, like the size, the athleticism, all of it's there. So I'm curious to see how well he does. From a line perspective, man, I'm trying to think back to some of the previous fights we saw, and the fact that we even saw some minus 300s or so on the card. I mean, obviously, those are pretty big favorites, but I mean, I'm going to just go right out there and say that Islam Makhachev should be the betting favorite in this fight. And not only did I not mean betting favorite, but I mean the biggest favorite on this card. I think that everything that we're talking about when it comes to gauging fights just by watching them, as opposed to just looking at records and stuff like that, that's primarily where the Vegas lines come from. And when you look at it that way, this is an absolutely terrible fight for him. And so minus 300s, minus 400s, maybe, I think that makes a lot of sense here for Islam. So let's take a look. Okay. Minus 500. Obviously, when we get to these ranges, who really knows what it's going to be? But opened as a minus 500. Looks like he might close as a minus 700, maybe a minus 650 if anyone believes in that plus 400 line. But outside of that, man, I see Makhachev just dominating this fight. It's really hard to pick against him, only because those paths to victory are so minimal for Moises. But if he's actually training that hard and making sure he doesn't get taken down, can work from a distance and just wait for his opportunities in the most disciplined way possible, he has a chance to pull it off. But outside of that, man, I think this card is absolutely crazy, so exciting, so many great chess matches that we get in some of these smaller names and smaller cards. It's just going to be so fun, and I hope everyone's kind of riding that high of UFC 264 into this card, and I think UFC Vegas 31 has all the potential to surprise people. So I mean, as always, like, subscribe, hit that bell for updates. We're absolutely rolling now. Getting so excited for, keeping this thing going. We have so much potential here. And frankly, even with Instagram kind of not letting us post or anything like that, we're doing so well on YouTube right now. So let's keep that momentum going. I'm getting these videos out for you guys much earlier. So without further ado, until next week, peace.